welcome you to Manhattan. I'd love to share it with you because I believe in it. I think that's where a lot of creative stuff is going to happen. You know, if you can get outside of that marketplace kind of content.
It's very good and contact the people in this way.
Yeah,
it's really excellent.
It's going on a long time. They got more hours of programming produced by Access people around the country than the rest of the industry.
Really?
But they don't have wide distribution.
Of course.
Welcome very much to Conversations, where it's a great pleasure to welcome to the program Robert Thurman. And he's an internationally recognized student of Buddhism, and he's a professor at Columbia University here in New York. And Robert Thurman, welcome very much to Conversations here on this program that's likely to be airing on Christmas Eve Day.
Well, thank you, Harold. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure. And I happen to welcome you to Public Access Television, which I think you might find interesting in that it exists as a below-the-radar kind of facility of communication that's in the society. But we can talk maybe weave that in a little bit. But I wonder maybe you could share your own background. You've had a pretty checkered background. I read where you went and tried to work with Che Guevara and Castro at one time.
I never heard of Che Guevara, but when I was a teenager at the age of 17, before I didn't even know whether Castro was a communist. I just thought he was a poet.
Yeah, right. No.
And this was 1958, and a friend of mine on a bet left prep school and went to Cuba.
Right.
But we didn't make it. We got stopped in Miami by some Cuban exiles. And they said that they didn't think that our recruitment would do them very much good. So they recommended instead that we prepare ourselves to help the struggle in some other way. And what we ended up doing was going to Mexico, and then I lived there for a year and worked on a ranch.
Oh, you did? In Mexico,
Yes, in Mexico.
Yeah. But then you studied at, what were you studying then? I mean, before you picked up, as it were, if I understand, maybe you could share.
Well, I was at Exeter. I was at Phillips Exeter just studying to be a yuppie, you know.
Yeah, right.
Studying preppy subjects in order to become a yuppie. And instead I thought I liked poetry, and I was captured by the poetry. He was writing poetry when he was in the trenches, Castro, before he became kind of a little bit of a mug.
I had a great thing, New Eurekan. Do you know it here in town, the New Eurekan Poets Cafe?
Yeah, I've heard of them, but
I went down there the other day. The program that aired last week.
Oh, the Moth, you mean?
No, this is the thing. They got the poet. I had a friend of mine. He's an old friend. He's going to be the featured poet, and I went.
I see.
And I was used to just being a few people reading. And Ginsberg or something. But I went down. 300 people were in that place, and
That's
they were
great.
Poetry is happening in this country.
Really good.
It was one of the most encouraging things that I've run into in a long time.
That's extremely good.
So you're interested in poetry and the arts and
course.
Right?
Of course.
Okay.
So then I came back from that lark in Mexico, and then I went to Harvard.
Yeah. What did you do there?
At Harvard, I studied English and theater and things.
Yeah, theater and writing.
Yes.
And
all that sort of thing.
Yeah, right. And when did you pick up, and how did you pick up? Because you're well known, of course, by the Buddhist
well, then at Harvard, in my senior year, I had an accident that summer between junior and senior, lost this left eye. And that woke me up to the mortality of life, which doesn't usually do it at the age of 20.
Yeah.
And then I went to India to find a guru and try to find the meaning of life, so to speak.
That was a big jump there. Had you been thinking along those
lines? Yeah, I've been reading at Harvard. I was in English department, but I was into philosophy and psychology, and I began to realize that the Asian philosophers and psychologists were actually light years ahead of the Western ones.
Oh, really?
Yes, I did realize that, and I am ever more of that opinion still.
Yeah, you are more of that opinion all the time,
absolutely.
Right, from the knowledge you have.
Absolutely. We're an underdeveloped country in that respect, although we're catching up.
The underdeveloped being the West in general? The
West in general, yes. The Euro-American tradition, let's call it.
That's running the world by and large.
Unfortunately, running the world off a cliff.
That do you feel that? I feel that way.
Certainly.
I do. I really do.
We're developed and we're advanced in the sense that we're at the head of the group of lemmings
that
are heading for the cliff.
Thank you. I just spoke to a fellow here in the program before you, and I felt like they're leading us on a lemmings leap that a lot of people are existentially rallying against, don't you?
I'm afraid so.
I mean, I'm feeling very, very
In other words, the more and
pessimistic.
more they pretend to be giving us security. Now they're going to cancel the ABM treaty, for example.
Yeah, just now.
But it's just been proven to us that we're vulnerable under the radar 100%. We're vulnerable to people who are deeply unhappy, whose lives are worthless, who are crushed by this or that element of industrial culture.
Right.
And that's what we're vulnerable to, the crazed individual. And then they're making these space nuclear things just to make money with them.
Yeah.
And to make themselves feel secure. But actually, they can't defend us against anything and make us less secure.
Yeah, yeah, and this insecurity is growing.
It will
all the time.
regenerate an arms race, which makes us more insecure. So when I say lemmings, I'm saying that that in step after step and measure after measure, our leadership, and not only in this country, but all of the countries, because they're all following our sort of cultural bias, and our leadership is leading us into ever greater insecurity under the pretense of leading us into ever greater security.
Yeah, that's the pattern.
That actually should be a definition of insanity.
Yeah, that's right.
Actually.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's really good to hear, because I agree with you that 100%. But you say they. Now let's say you picked up on the Eastern traditions and Buddhism and so forth, and you think there's some wisdom there that we should be learning from?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
well, I think there's wisdom in the West too. I don't mean that Buddhism alone is going to save us. There's wisdom in the West too. But what I'm saying is that the predominant attitudes that are being foisted upon us by the sort of well-armed, well-funded people are not wisdom. They do not manifest wisdom, I'm afraid to say. They are based on greed. They are based on chauvinisms of various kinds, divisive attitudes, that we are the chosen type of attitudes. And these attitudes, given the backfiring tendency of modern technologies, the feedback loop firing tendencies, this kind of triggering of greed and hatred and things based on high technology and weapons of mass destruction and so forth is simply unsupportable.
And yet
Don't you think?
I absolutely couldn't agree with you more, and yet there it is. Makes you wonder whether or not people are able to put themselves in another person's position in a certain sense. We stand here now.
Yes, it's very hard to do that.
It is hard, I suppose, but it's something, I think it's a mark of something really worth trying to get in terms of empathy to the other person's position.
That's what the Dalai Lama would say, the cultivation of altruism, and what the true empathy, what the Tibetans call the yoga of the exchange of self and other. Literally developing as a yoga how to see things from the other person's perspective.
That's important.
That's a crucial skill that none of our leadership is trained in, I'm afraid to say.
I was just thinking about that in the program. I absolutely agree with you. They're not able to see it that way. And we have a hard time seeing, they have a hard time seeing it from the standpoint of the other. In this case, they're projecting that this 9/11 thing that has stunned everyone, that stunned the world so much, but that he takes a position that we stand for everything that's good and light and truth and justice in the world. But they're attacking us because we stand in good and light and justice in the world.
Yes.
And there's a locus of evil in a cave over there or something. Yes. And I really think it's so short-sighted.
Well, but the sad thing is,
something that we could learn if we were to try and put ourselves in their position.
The sad thing is, well, in that case, though, of course, the sad thing is that the people on the other side are also think they are goodness and light, and they have God behind them, and they're all holy and righteous, and we stand for all evil. So it's a kind of both sides in polarizing things are. We are more right than them because they attacked us first. And we have a right to defend ourselves, absolutely. I'm not against that. But the point is that the absolutization and the demonization of the other is what caused it. After all, Bin Laden and the Qaeda people, they were recruited by us when we were when Bush's father was joining in the march of demonizing the Soviet Union.
Yeah, that's right, in Afghanistan.
And because of demonizing the Soviet Union, they were the locus of all evil. Then it didn't matter if you hired some pretty evil religious fanatics in Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and in Afghanistan to destroy that evil. So it's our evil. Well, our evil is good, you see. But then our evil will then turn around and attack us. That's the problem.
Yeah, he's a bastard.
So the key is the demonizing and the absolutizing of everything.
Yeah, why do
we
do that so much, human species? How long have we been here? 200,000 years, perhaps, they'd tell us the DNA.
Well, there's no beginning to our existence, the Buddhists would say.
Oh, okay.
They don't buy this linear, material, single planet life form.
It's all a seamless web of interrelated reality.
Yes, there have been human beings in other planets infinitely, and there will continue to be. In the Buddhist view, it's a little bit wild and woolly and scientific. Sci-fi, rather. Sci-fi. It's an ancient sci-fi vision.
Yeah, it is, and that there is no. So if we were to look at it in normal terms, Homo sapiens sapien as a species among the other species.
Well, if you look at it, I wouldn't call that normal. I'd say if you look at it in materialist Western history terms, where there's only been one planet and human beings have evolved from apes, then yes, a few 100,000 years,
You don't think that is the case? That
we Buddhists don't think that, no.
You do not. Could you share with us what?
Well, we think that life is beginningless.
Okay.
We think that life is beginningless, and actually endless also, and that we've been reborn infinite numbers of times, and maybe this world has supported life for a few million years, perhaps as we know it, or a few billion. But other worlds are in different stages of evolving and devolving in other realms. There's no limit to the size of the universe. It's an infiniverse, not a universe. And therefore, when we die and are reborn, we don't have to always come back on the same planet. So people can die and be reborn in all different planets. And then when we die this time, which we will, all of us, probably with the exception of you.
Well, I don't know.
Anyway, I will. Then we'll be reborn elsewhere, other places. You know? And this will go on forever. And that's why Buddhists, since they feel that way, that's why they think that this life that we have now is a very important opportunity for us to develop the goodwill, the openness, the lovingness, the gentleness, and the happiness that will ensure that in those further endless lives we'll be happy and not miserable. Do you follow? Because what we do in this life will have endless consequences. We don't want to do any bad things.
Because is that like I mean, bear with my ignorance.
Sure.
I mean, Buddhism like that. Is it coming out of the Vedic traditions? Is it a heresy of the Vedic?
It comes out of the Buddha's enlightenment.
Is it unique to that? When we talk,
no, I don't think it's unique. For example, in Christianity, or any of the Abrahamic traditions of the West, what we call the Abrahamic traditions, the idea that God is infinite and the world comes from God is like a way of saying that the world is infinite. And the idea that when you die, either you have eternal heaven or eternal hell, or there's a few, I guess, people on probation here and there. But the fact that you go on eternally with whatever you do is a form of saying that what we do now bears infinite consequences. So, for example, if you kill a lot of people, then you have kind of an endless bad effect of that action. It causes a lot of suffering to you later in other later lives.
Is that called karma? Is like what would it
Yes, karma? And so, well, they call it evolutionary action or karma in Buddhism, yes. But in other words, that so those theistic views, but they make it sound simple by saying, oh yeah, because God, we go to God and God is infinite. We come from God and God is infinite. But we are only just here now. But that's just a way of saying almost the same thing. The Buddhists don't say that one God is everything. There are many gods, but there's no one that is the big boss. The Buddhists say there are many bosses. And we, in a way, therefore, have to be responsible for ourselves.
Isn't that similar to the Vedic tradition?
No, well...
what is the difference between the Hindu and the Buddhist? I mean, they come geographically from the same part of the world in a certain sense and that sort of thing, but can you differentiate
but Buddhism spread everywhere in the world.
That's true.
But because it was not specific to a particular culture.
That's interesting.
And
it's very popular
Some of the Hindus think that, the Indian people feel that Buddhism came from the Vedic tradition, but the Buddhists don't think that.
They do not?
No. The Buddhists think that the Buddha chose India to be reborn in because India at that time, and for most of the last few thousand years, was the most advanced of the ancient cultures, much more than the Greek culture or the Chinese culture or the Persian culture.
About the same time as Pericles, no?
Yes, about the same time as the Athenian event, but that India had, 36 Athenses. Instead of just one. Because you look at the population of Greece, little place, and huge India with the big alluvial river was already much bigger at that time, many more city-states. So India was more advanced. So Buddha chose it because it was a more tolerant country. But then the Buddha became enlightened, they believe, meaning understood how reality worked, how cause and effect works, how things happen the way they do, and what are the effects of things that do happen. And because he understood that, then he gave a description of the world, like a scientist almost, that was very reliable, the Buddhists believe. And that put him a little bit in a bit of a rebel against the Vedic tradition.
Which was Hinduism, the established order.
Which was a kind of religious tradition, but the Buddha's movement was more educational than religious. It was not into ordering people to believe certain things. It was rather into, or telling them to go to church and do certain rituals.
Right.
It was rather telling people to learn about the world and learn about themselves. And if they did that, then sooner or later they could understand themselves and understand the world. So the Buddha's teaching was based on the Buddha's insight that we human beings have the ability to understand our world. We don't have to blindly follow leaders. We can understand what should be done ourselves with our own good reasoning and our own good judgment and our own good experience.
That could be seen as subversive to political leaders in the culture.
It was subversive at the time, and that's why he picked India, where they were more tolerant because they were richer, more relaxed. They weren't like rigid authoritarians like the Westerners, like the Greeks.
Do you think the richer and the better off you are, the more relaxed you're able to be with diversity?
Yeah, because you have more surplus.
You have
more surplus.
Right.
You don't need to like get in and corner the market and grab everything and hoard it. In fact, you enjoy giving and you enjoy your surplus, you know what I mean? And actually you want more peaceful people, because too many warriors in that situation is dangerous. Then they'll be rebelling all the time. Right. They'll be fighting. So then you're happy to have people do yoga and meditate and be peaceful. You're not so militaristic. A country that is more in scarcity, like in a desert, like in West Asia, they tend to develop religions where there's very little, can't share too much. We're the chosen, the bad people, we should get rid of them, the unbelievers. You know, they get a little more differentiating between themselves than when you're more wealthy.
So scarcity.
For example, now now in America and in Europe, we have become more liberal. Until very recently, when we're getting a little bit nowadays, a little bit uptight. But we were more liberal because through imperialism, we had taken the wealth away from a lot of the other parts of the world. Right. And then sort of we feel we've got more. Like, you know, people in California can spend time in hot tubs. They're more wealthy, you see. So then when you get wealthy, you begin to realize that the whole problem in life is not just how much food you have in your granary. You begin to realize that one of your bigger problem is how much static is in your mind.
Yeah, and what's a good life? What's
craziness is in your emotional life. And then you begin to work on the yogas of how to control your emotions, how to develop better wisdom and intelligence, and how to be more peaceful and relaxed. That's what you do.
You think it's a metaphor for the whole planet in a certain sense? If you say, Bucky Fuller was a hero of mine.
He was a hero of mine, too.
Really? Yeah, he was.
In fact, Bucky Fuller, I definitely think, came from a different world.
He was from some other space.
He came from a world called Abhirati, I believe.
What is that,
Abhirati is a world in the eastern direction. Beyond as many universes as there are grains of sand in 62 Ganges riverbeds. To use a little bit of an Indian number. And he called Abhirati, which is presided over by Akshobhya Buddha, which is a universe of positive thinking, where people see how to make use of even the negative in a positive way. And they never give up, and they don't get into some sort of inferiority complex, as Bucky Fuller used to say. He used to blame religions for creating in people a sense of inferiority about their world and about themselves, and creating the scarcity complex in people that caused them to hoard and to destroy each other and genocide each other, thinking that there isn't enough on this planet.
Well, he had the notion also, if I may. You know, I was just talking with some people here. We got this thing, and you know, we've got the ability geopolitically now after, I guess it was probably around 1970, Joshua Lederberg would say and so forth, that one person could geopolitically set off the weapons of destruction as part of the technological extension we've done in the world. And we can now, at one person's discretion in a certain sense, in a Sarajevo First World War kind of sense, and so set off a system that if it's unleashed, we can destroy their species in a good deal.
Oh, you're darn right.
But we couldn't do it in the Second World War.
Yeah,
we didn't have that Promethean capability. Well, so after 200,000 years, 10,000 generations, something's going on in terms of the technological extension.
Well, we've tricked ourselves into the need for enlightenment.
Okay.
We've been tricked into a box where now our only solution is to become enlightened.
Yeah.
Really. If we go on being in the, if we go on repeating the patterns of the recent pattern of history, then clearly, because of the power of the weapons, it's not just cudgels and stones.
No, not any longer.
We will destroy ourselves, as the Dalai Lama says.
You think we might be heading for that?
In the 21st century, we cannot afford the level of violence that we had in the 20th century.
Yeah, it's a horror.
And therefore, we have to overcome those kind of habits and have a century of dialogue and peacefulness, as we have to. We're forced in other words, the fight and flight mechanism, as they say, is no longer evolutionarily survival enhancing. The self-overcoming ability that humans do have, the ability to reprogram their hostility and so forth, and their gut reactions, and their adrenal surges, and the ability to control those and reprogram them, that is what is survival enhancing at this time.
At this time, that's what's called for.
That's right. That's what's called for.
It's really hard to find among our political or business or the people who are running the planet.
That's true, but it seems to be true, but I don't lose all faith. I think that there are some, and some are better than others, and we're just in a very dangerous spot at the moment because the people the attitudes that kind of ran the world from World War II's time kind of just won't let go. Do you know what I mean? The people, for example, voted for a person who wrote a book that indicated his awareness of the human being's responsibility for the environment and the planet. He did write that book.
Yeah, Mr. Book.
He may be inept in some ways as a politician, but he did write that book.
Earth and the Balance.
And the majority of our people voted for him.
That's right.
But anachronistic structures of money and of political power and bureaucracy put in power, nevertheless, a person who doesn't know that, who hasn't matured to that point of recognizing our responsibility, thinks we can forget about global warming, thinks we can make missile shields and things, and that'll solve the problem, which is very sad and very dangerous.
And they're in the saddle.
Yes,
at the moment. They're in the saddle now.
And
putting things in place that are getting firmer and firmer.
But you can't be that pessimistic about it, though, because the majority of our people...
Okay, well, if we're going on a lemming's leap...
The majority of our people voted against that person.
Oh, well, in that sense...
The majority of the voters.
Yeah.
By a good 500,000 people.
Yeah, that's right. But
and probably even more if a lot of things hadn't been thrown away.
Yeah, I know. There were a lot of votes lost with ballots and things like that. Wasn't it an incredible show? I mean, that
But the amazing thing about human beings is that even that other gentleman who shall be unnamed, who did not mature to that point and is playing roulette in a kind of a dangerous manner.
Very scary.
Although, defending us at the moment against some even worse scary people, we have to acknowledge. But that person in this position of powerful information overload, there is some hope that person will wake up sufficiently so as not to lead us to total Armageddon. We still have to hope that. And work for that.
Well, yeah, one would have to hope for that.
We can't just demonize that person.
Yeah, it seems like a good idea.
You can't demonize anybody.
It might, yeah. And Fuller, back to Fuller if you could, the idea was around 7. He had this idea in his world game, resources. He had the idea that the number of people who could be seen, he's thinking materialistically in a sense, the number of people who could be provided with what he called life support, the percentage was growing with the technological development of mankind. Steam engine, you get more higher percentage. And he said, and he had this thing where he had projected 10% on the world system scale, where it seemed to be halves by the First World War, 20% by the Second. And he said in 1952 we had a 20-year period of imminent crisis to all human institutions as we approached and crossed what he saw the 50% mark. He came up finally in the end to say that we crossed that line in 1970, that there were within a certain context of understanding more at a material level of understanding and technologically augmented capability of providing life support. There were, for the first time in 200,000 years of human history, more haves. We crossed the 50% mark.
I know.
Than have not.
I know, but you know what? I'm sorry. That's an aspect of Bucky's thinking.
All right, let me finish.
That I can't completely.
No, we're just going to say that we were then, in a certain sense, for the first time in all of that, we were in a post-scarcity ontologic reality. And that we were transcending scarcity. Right. And that is an adverse side to the destructive scenario, and that those two lines sort of, the destructive capability manifested itself along about that time, and so did this other idea that we're transcending scarcity. There is no evidence with any of our thinking or intellectual or anything that there might be something to this idea that he had, that there's been a qualitative change on the adverse positive side of things by which we can begin to direct our policy decision-making. Can you address that, or how do you address it as a Buddhist?
Well, how I address that just myself is that Fuller being an engineer, Bucky Fuller being an engineer, with a boundless optimism.
Comprehensive.
I think his holistic thinking was excellent. Yeah. But there, I think there is a little bit the misplaced optimism and confidence in technological know-how.
Well, yeah.
And I think that, you see, he underestimated, along with the technology of farming and this and that, he kind of did underestimate the impact of environmental degradation, technology and environment, the impact on leading, creating tremendous overpopulation, cycles of huge overpopulation, the impact of technologies of information and social control that enable smaller and smaller groups to control larger and larger groups of people. These kind of things I think were underestimated. So though while I do agree that given the knowledge that we have, if we did implement things, we could supply everyone where there would be no desperate person on the planet.
In fact,
I certainly agree with that.
They might be able to realize
the fact
their
is, right now,
we're not
that
doing
we
it.
have 700 plus billionaires in the planet who control equivalent resources to 3 billion lower, poorer people on the
about
planet.
half the population.
So 700 people have the same resources of 3 billion people.
I thought it was 400. You say it's 700.
700
I
now.
think it's 700.
It was only 17 in 1980 when Reagan got in.
Really?
It's now over 700.
There's now 700 billion.
Over 700.
So the resources
and they control
of 700.
equivalent resources of 3 billion.
Yeah, half the
there
population
you see
in the world.
Increasing desperation in larger numbers.
And the trends
and
are
increasing
unsettling.
polarization.
And the trends are unsettling?
The trends are highly unstable and very dangerous.
And going in the wrong direction.
In a way, going in the wrong direction.
Yeah. So where will we look for some sort of a policy to inform our policy decision makers on the planet and so forth? My thought, I always thought that thing of Fuller's was really something that ought to be put
Well, I totally agree, but where's
discover.
Fuller's comprehensive design studies in Urbana, Illinois? I don't think it's highly manned and highly funded
Not
now.
Urbana, it was at Carbondale.
Carbondale, that's right. It should be funded more highly. There should be, like it should be, the government should be getting this information and giving it to corporate leaders. But they're not trying to do that.
Does it make any sense?
But to come back to how I react to that, let me say this.
Yeah.
The sad thing is that the corporate world, which is taken over in a way from a lot of the national governments,
Dave Corton says they
and
run the world.
Tremendous control, that they are still playing this sort of short-term exploit resources bottom line thing. They're still too male-dominated and male-paradigmed, and they could make a lot of money feeding these 3 billion poor people.
Absolutely, it's a
They
huge
could make
market.
a lot of money helping develop population control, which we know what succeeds population-wise. It is the education of women and affluence. You don't have to go and sterilize everybody. You have to educate them. We know that succeeds. And they could do fantastic environmental reconstruction. And if they just took a little bit of longer-term, more holistic thinking, and there I agree with Fuller, and I love Fuller too, if they would look at the whole output. For example, what use is it to make $100 billion in 5 years in doing something that's too extractive when by the time you got it, you can't even spend it because you have to lock yourself up in a high-security compound and you have to have anthrax masks and wear them all the time.
Right.
And you have to worry about people crashing planes into your building.
That's true.
What's the point?
That's true.
The money is then useless.
That's right.
If you have just $1 billion, or even a few million is enough to have fun. You could, and you recycle the other, and you see to it that all the people who might poison you or bomb you or assassinate you or mug you are a little bit more peaceful and have a stake in living peacefully with you. You're going to have a better time.
Just makes sense, doesn't it?
It makes sense.
Why aren't we doing it?
Because people are not thinking everything through.
They're not thinking holistically.
They don't think it through. The guy who's out there pushing, get the junk bond, get $100 billion, is not thinking about the prostate cancer, the prison sentence, the heart attack, the divorce, the alienation from the children. They work 18 hours a day, to make that $1 billion. They're not thinking about their whole values of their life.
Well, what about Fuller?
You know why? You know who's at fault? I'm at fault.
All right.
Do you know why I'm at fault?
Why?
Because I'm a professor in the liberal arts educational institution.
Yeah.
I ran a curriculum.
Yeah.
My institution has 75% males still. Only 25% females. Teachers.
Why is that? Why is that?
Because we're no good.
Uh-huh.
And we teach a curriculum that doesn't teach people to get value out of life. We teach them how to manipulate things to get success and profit, and to be clever and invent diabolical things to gain more personal power, but not to enjoy it.
It's all bottom line,
We don't teach them how to enjoy their life. I mean, we people...
Well, that's a waste of time.
We people in the humanities... we try. We would like to teach them to meditate a little bit. We would like to teach them how to look at a painting or to read a poem. But, we are low on the totem pole. They have to
I
be
mean, you are
pre-med.
low on the.
They have to learn biology, pre-med, math, science, sociology, manipulative sciences that don't do anything for the quality of their heart and mind. And we can't.
Well, they're going to eliminate all.
We can hardly teach them ethics.
That's just frills. That's frills.
No, those are the tools. Those are the tools with which they're going to make money.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's what life is about.
Therefore,
and isn't that what they're saying life is about?
Our universities are falling down on the job. And more on top of that, they're taking over the boards of trustees. They're all corporate people who made money.
The corporations
and then they want to run the university like a corporation.
Well, why not? I mean, you know, that's
make
the way
more money.
To make more money.
And meanwhile...
And the university will become a factory for turning out bureaucrats to fit into their organization.
Which then create factories that turn out all kinds of unnecessary, polluting, destructive, exploitative products.
Like people. Minds.
No, that's the university. But no, but I'm saying then the corporations that those people make a lot of things that are not so helpful to people. But try to suck their money.
That's all going like that.
But they're not really that helpful to them.
Fuller was what he called a comprehensivist. That is, he was not.
Right.
They gave him, they threw him out of Harvard, you know. And then they finally gave him an honorary degree, and they didn't know what the heck we were going to give it in because he was into everything. He was interested in everything. The start of Synergetics says, dare to be a comprehensivist.
And
it's a seamless web.
Let's go ahead to the Dalai Lama, people who are still living now. Colleague of Fuller's. Fuller is a Buddha, I grant you that. He's an enlightened person.
Most decided.
But he's and we can go back and find his thing.
Yeah, but his spirit
living today is the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is alive.
Yeah.
The Dalai Lama was just in Oslo celebrating the 100th year of the 100th year of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Along with a lot of other Nobel Peace Prize winners. They put out messages to the Burmese government, to the Chinese government, to the different world coalition to try to be more peaceful, to try to think holistically, to probably, I didn't actually see the joint communique, but I bet they asked, and I'm asking President Bush and our leaders to spend a few billions before they give more tax breaks, to spend a few billions on rebuilding Afghanistan. If we want to show the Muslim world that we're not just some mad bomber, oil grabbers, and some, and if we want to really defeat the spirit of bin Laden, we have defeated now that the localized ones in Afghanistan, but they have those Qaeda people around. But if we want to defeat them spiritually and, intellectually, then we have to show that we also are willing to rebuild a Muslim country. And we are willing to pay back for all the destruction of our fighting of the Soviets, and now our fighting of them, and all the bombing and the blasting. Rebuild the beautiful melon patches. Afghanistan used to be a melon
orchards.
Patch.
They had orchards.
Fabulous orchards.
Apricots.
They sold their apricots all over India,
absolutely.
all over Asia.
Right.
And we should really rebuild the life of the Afghanis. And then their form of Islam will be more moderate and peaceful, and they'll no longer be a menace to anybody. And we really have to do that. And then we have to get down to Pakistan, and we have to put a stop to their fundamentalist movement, and help to rebuild that, and help to rebuild an education system for them, but not give them any more weapons. We should not do that. And etc. Country by country, we now, in order to solve this danger of developing a kind of monolithic Muslim fundamentalist movement of over 1.5 billion people who are on our case.
Yeah, that's right. And
we have to be generous here. We can be firm. We should be violent when we have to, because we can't have people blowing up our buildings and sending us anthrax Christmas cards. But we have to also be generous. We can't just be violent.
They're building that anthrax out. They just had in the paper today, the government of the United States of America has been creating anthrax out in Washington and that kind of thing. And
but I'm an American.
And
I'm for our government.
All right, you're right.
But we have to show generosity. America has been loved in the world through its generosity.
Well, we did well in Japan after the Second War, don't you think?
And in Germany.
And
in Italy.
How did we do in Vietnam? Seems
we didn't do well.
We did not, and we did very
demonized
bad.
them, and we haven't helped them.
And how many did we do in there? Do you remember? It was something like 2 million.
We killed over 2 million people.
Over 2 million people with napalm and things like that. Isn't there some karma to be caught up with on something like that?
It's incredibly
stupid. So what is there about that kind of thing that we did that makes it possible for us to think that we're now going to get enlightened in terms of dealing with the world in a way that makes it
No, it's just nothing that we... we've been generous at some times in the past.
But
we have a violent side. We have been generous.
Well, the mood of now is violence.
No,
The move now is violence.
Well, we have a right to defend ourselves. Preventive violence is part of nonviolence.
Did the Viet Cong have
Surgical violence is part of nonviolence.
You're a spiritual
The
person.
Viet Cong thing, they were patriots. We were misinformed and misled by bad leadership such as Nixon, who was no good.
Well,
And everybody tries to make him into a saint now, but he was no good, it's clear. He goes all the way back in the 50s when he was Eisenhower's vice president, and he knew about the French getting out of Vietnam, and we shouldn't have gone in. Then Ho Chi Minh would have unified the country rather quickly. They are the natural enemies of the Chinese. They wouldn't have spread communism. They would have wanted to join the world with much less violence, would have been much easier. It was misinformation on the part of our leadership. And our leadership is still not too well informed now.
I think they're
but I think they're a
abysmally
bit better informed.
Well, you said
no, a bit better. I think a bit better.
Okay, but you just told me we started this program saying that our leadership is leading us on a lemming's leap.
Yes, they
and
are.
the lemming's leap is to
The lemming's leap.
nuclear-based destruction of the species.
Missile
so
defense, fake missile defense.
In Vietnam, we couldn't destroy ourselves, I don't think.
Oh, sure we could.
No, the planet.
We have been able to destroy ourselves
Since when? What was the year?
1950s.
50?
Since the 1950s.
We could wipe out. You know, it's important. Do you think it's important?
1950s.
Do you think it would be important for us, for the record, to get when we cross that line?
Well,
The way Mr. Fuller is trying to get us to look at the line when we
I think
transcend
what's important
scarcity?
now is how we move ahead. We have to leave people with something hopeful about how we move ahead. And what they need to know about how we move ahead is not just railing about how awful everything has been. That we can do, and we could go on for that if we had more time.
Yeah, you only
to
got
do it.
so much time in this
But
universe.
you only reach people even in this, like free media, a little bit at a time, and they need some hopeful prospect of how to go ahead, and that is, don't demonize even those who are leading us on the lemming march.
Don't demonize. You don't think?
No.
Demonize. Don't do it.
There's no demons. We have to say this is a bad mistake, and that is, but everyone can learn.
So it's Will Rogers'
Even a
time.
demon can learn.
Even a demon can learn.
That's right.
And that's a spiritual
And we have to
thing.
try to teach the demon.
That's a spiritual mindset to have in the world, so that it's not
right.
enemy. You don't have enemies.
Yes.
You don't have
For
enemies.
example, if
you
we
know?
could capture
just
Bin Laden,
unenlightenedness.
if we could capture Bin Laden, let's just have a scenario, put him in chains, and like bring him all over here. We should have a special school, attached to Columbia University or something. He should learn to meditate.
Upper West Side.
He should have some feminism lessons, definite feminism. He should have a comparative religion course, right? He should have lots of different things about not doing terrorism and the unviability of collateral damage, of killing innocent people to make non-innocent people
terrorism
feel pain.
All right, terrorism is a thing. I know Nelson Mandela was called a terrorist right up to the day he got the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, terrorism, George Washington was called a terrorist by the British. So the terrorism is what? UN can't come up with the definition of it.
I
because
can
how
come
do
up
you
with
deal?
the definition of terrorism.
Well, I'd like you
terrorism
to.
Is the
UN can't
terrorism
do it.
is
Can't come up with a workable
is the
definition.
self-righteous infliction of violence on innocent people in order to cause pain to those who you're thinking of as your enemy.
As opposed to some
cause
political
pain and terror
instead,
you're thinking of as
as
your
opposed
enemy.
to some sort of political objective.
As opposed to honest fighting with your enemy.
Honest fighting
That's
is
right. Therefore,
what's the difference
actually,
between
in
honest
my
fighting?
opinion, I know that would not be shared probably by our government, but in my opinion, even back in World War II, the firebombing of Dresden,
I was just going to say Dresden.
the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
we knew what we were doing.
those are that is state-sponsored terrorism.
Well, isn't that terrorism?
That is terrorism.
That is
State-sponsored terrorism.
So then is Vietnam napalming terrorism?
There's an element of terrorism in Vietnam.
Terrorism is, in a certain sense, you got a super hyper power where they can extend power, and they can do it. And
the point is, non-terrorism in military
the way
affairs,
it's being defined now,
non-terrorism in military affairs is fighting other soldiers who are there to oppose you. The contest of champions.
since bombing Dresden.
Contest of
It's been
champions.
increasingly civilians have died in the war.
Civilian bombing and dragging civilians into warfare, I believe personally, is terrorism.
Yeah, well then, so terrorism is not some guy in a cave in Afghanistan doing that.
Not
Much
only,
as
no, it is
only.
the cave in Afghanistan, but
the
not only that.
state-sponsored terrorism
But
is
yes,
something...
you heard, like for example, what Sharon is doing today to the Palestinians is a kind of terrorism,
is
certainly.
a kind of. Why qualify it?
Because
Why
it's
qualify it?
state- because it's
what's the
precise,
difference between
it's
state...
state-sponsored terrorism.
So state terrorism is the terrorism inflicted by the weak, by the strong. If the strong
Yes.
can inflict it on the weak,
That's
then
right.
it's not terrorism, it's
No,
state terrorism.
it is terrorism. I just said it's terrorism. It is terrorism, but it's states terrorism.
It's on the name of realpolitik.
And the point is that in a sense, in our world system today, unfortunately, people consider state-sponsored terrorism to be something normal,
legitimate,
which is wrong.
Well, how do we get, yeah, but that's what a kind
and
of
what they
mindset-
have to learn is that state-sponsored terrorism destroys the moral high ground of the state, and therefore it draws the kind that the individual terrorism that they then deplore.
Hans Morgenthau said,
That's
wrote
what
a
they
book.
should face.
Hans Morgenthau wrote a book, and he said, "Moral nation, immoral world." He said that in the world of realpolitik and in the world between nations, is that you have a moral code, a legal code you live in under in a nation, but on the international scale, there are no holds barred. It's all out,
well, that's
and it's
wrong. We
it's
have
realpolitik.
International
and
law,
that mind,
international courts.
there's some growing.
UN has to have the power. America has to turn its weaponry over to UN eventually.
You think
and we have to have a state, we have to have interstate and international law. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I guess it's growing some, right? But
well,
it's
there's
still
some hopeful things. We are one of the big obstacles.
Pardon?
We, the United States at the moment, are one of the big
The United
obstacles.
States of America.
Yes.
Yeah,
we won't sign the World Court thing. We won't follow international law.
Yeah.
We want our unilateralism.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And that's not correct, really. We are setting the wrong example there. And we just think we're getting away with it because we are more powerful at the moment.
Well, we are, and it usually is that might makes right.
No, that's
in the way the world works. And the thing is, violence,
I don't agree that the world
violence
that's only
works.
short run working.
Violence
I don't agree.
Works.
No,
you don't think it does?
I don't think it
on
works.
the long run. How long a run do we go?
Pretty long. Pretty long.
I mean,
look at where's the Roman Empire today? Where's the German Empire? They did violence. They conquered Europe right off there. Where are they?
Yeah,
where's Tojo? It didn't work. Now, if we start to behave like that, where will we be at 50 years from now, 30 years from now? Nowhere.
Yeah, but
we'll be finished.
Yeah, but everything changes, and violence is still the order of the day in terms of what operates in the corporate boardroom, what operates in the
I don't agree.
You don't
I think that's short-sighted. I think that's self-destructive. And I think that the meek shall inherit the earth. Let me take a quote, a famous Buddhist teacher.
Yes.
The meek shall inherit the earth means that these violent people will destroy themselves.
Trouble is, they can destroy themselves, but now they can take all the rest of us with them.
Yeah, they can. But, I
for
don't
the first time, only since whether we can. I want to know the year. There was
Harold,
55, or was it 70?
You have to have faith. We have to have a little faith here. Here, I mean, I hate to be. I'm a Buddhist. We're very scientific. We're not really heavy believers, but we have to have a little faith here, but on a logical level.
Yeah.
Since nuclear weapons have gone to the mega tonnage that they have gone to,
and biological viral
and other things, the fact that we are sitting here alive today is something like a miracle.
All right,
considering that we're led by lemming leaders,
and have been throughout most of the history.
And have been for the last 50 years.
Don't you love?
Mostly.
Do you like the line of Joyce? He had Daedalus say, "History is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken."
That's probably good.
Do you like that?
I do like.
Yeah,
it.
I like it too.
But since we are alive here today, we have to acknowledge sort of the input of some sort of angelic presence. That when the lunatic gets ready to press the button on the nuclear football, whichever lunatic, something happens where it's like the air becomes like a solid wall, and something emotionally, even to win their football game, they somehow don't really want to destroy everybody.
Stay that hand. Huh?
Something holds it back. And for example, I do believe, I said it before they said it, by the way, I said it before they said it in the news.
No.
I knew that bin Laden and his people never dreamed they really would knock those buildings down.
Yeah, they
thought maybe there'd be a little smack up, a little good PR.
Yeah,
but that they would knock them down and stir up the hornets. They thought they could still hang out there because they didn't think they would really destroy that many people or really break those buildings.
Well,
they wouldn't imagine they'd be such shabby buildings as to fall down like that.
Well, that's one way to think.
Well, I'm sorry, that's a shabby building to me that falls down.
Well, they hit it at the right place. Well, they did it. It was an incredible thing.
Even the guy today is saying that the fireproofing had left something to be desired.
No, well, perhaps so. That's bad engineering or something.
And they had no internal columns. Some sort of lightweight aeronautics, no internal columns is a little silly, I think, for a big building.
It was an incredible.
I never liked the building.
It was incredible. It was an incredible event that they were able to pull that off.
So they were shocked.
And from there, if you're empathetic and you're in their position and they've got the position, it's hard for people to think. They probably do really, in their heart of hearts and in their firmest conviction and soul-searching sense, have a deep-seated hatred of what we stand for, of the United States of America, and
but
the fact that they are...
yes, but nobody...
So when they look at those events...
But
that
yes,
we
they were gleeful
so
in one way.
They would be naturally gleeful.
No, I don't think so. I think I think even they who saw it, there was something cosmic about it. And I think everyone everyone who saw it felt a shudder of terror. Even the terrorists, but the ones who died didn't. But of course, yes, they did, because after dying, they thought they would go to paradise, and instead they headed down. And they were really unhappy where they headed, but because they were killing people. Innocent people. But the point is that even them, they saw it, although on the one hand that was more than what they dreamed they could succeed in, they were terrified because they realized that something tremendous had changed. It's like what you say about the fact that we're all dealing with weapons of mass destruction. The power of everything is too great. And so we have to become different kind of beings now. We cannot be the same kind of knee-jerk, flip-out, angry being. Who's going to really hate everybody. We cannot. It's impossible. The reverberations, the consequences are too powerful. And so I believe when the Dalai Lama spoke on October 24th to the European Parliament, that in spite of what people were saying, that now we have to have a century of dialogue, not violence.
Yeah, but people have been saying this since the Cro-Magnon cave.
Haven't they?
Haven't they?
No, they haven't.
What's changed?
And you should read your Maria Jimbutas and your Civilization of the Goddess book. 10,000 years the boys have been in charge, and we've been having a lot of warfare and Trojan wars and things. But for 90,000 years before that, the girls were more in charge, the ladies, and it was much more peaceful. There's archaeology that shows that the myth of the endless warrior is a myth. It's a modern militaristic myth, but it's not necessarily the absolute truth.
No.
And human beings are actually gentle, and they are more gentle than they are not gentle. And there's a lot, even the most hated person who has the deepest hatred, they still will love their own infant.
Yeah.
They still will love their own something. So therefore, human beings are just... The problem with human beings is they can become extremely bad, and they can become extremely good. That's the great thing about human beings. And that's the great opportunity of human life. So we're now in the position where even the bad people realize that extreme badness is self-destructive. There's no winner. Do you think, Harold... Look at this way. Do you realize that there is no way we would, in a different technological situation... At this very time, there's no way we would avoid a World War III. They all want to have it. It's the knee-jerk thing is to do. Get out and get all the enemies. Crusade, he said. He shouted about a crusade for one day. Luckily, they quieted that down. First thing he mentioned was a crusade. They're talking about a jihad. They're talking about a jihad on the other side. So I'm saying that's what they want. That's what they sort of feel like doing. But they're not doing it.
What do you call those B-52?
They can't do it.
What do you call those bombs that are going on?
I mean,
what is that?
That's not World War III. That's
not
a
World War
local
III.
thing to knock out that particular network, which should be knocked out. We will not be having Al-Qaeda on our buses, and we should not, in our subways. We must not have that.
And cluster bombs.
Our children and grandchildren, we must not allow that. We have a duty to stop that.
And you think that's the way we can stop it?
Yes, that was one way. Actually, I think, personally, that it would have been better if we had funded the so-called Northern Alliance immediately, and also the more moderate people in the Pashtun area.
Well, we did. It took 3 months.
Immediately. No. First we went and blasted with bombing. I believe that we should have, and we were talking about how we can't deal with Northern Alliance. They're no good, too, because we were listening to the Pakistani intelligence, which was a big mistake.
Well, that's Pashtun.
If we should have...
That's a political...
We should have a real ninja patrol. Where's our ninjas?
Where
are they?
No.
We have them in the movies. Rambo, Chuck Norris. We have ninjas. People fantasize American ninjas. But where's the actual real one who can actually get there to a cave and find somebody without bombing the whole county?
Yeah, well, you don't have hot running water and stuff like that.
Are all Americans such cowards?
Yeah. But
I don't think so.
Yeah, Pogo said we look at our enemy and it's us. I wonder, I mean, is it really the fact that...
We need ninjas.
You think, and that we're going to have this outward... And what about in other places where you think we can root it out? It's not that they are...
Certainly we can.
You think so?
Especially...
You think we're going to be able to root out the sources of terrorism
Definitely.
because we understand it well?
Because it's a two-pronged approach.
Okay.
The two-prong is develop, it's much less costly than hundreds of billions of dollars for missile defenses that don't work.
Were we trying to
spend a little bit, say $1 billion, on a real ninja patrol? If we have to hire some Japanese and some Taiwanese, Bruce Lee, hire them, the real ones. Okay, they exist. 2, that's one prong. I know that's not a popular prong amongst the peaceniks, but that's one
like
prong.
Covert CIA stuff?
Real stuff. And the second prong, instead of the stupid waste of high-tech missile defense, is we build up those countries, really make them comfortable, really give them enough to eat, really make them immune from recruitment by the terrorist people like the Qaeda, because they're having a good life. And then they will not shelter, the American patriots.
We should do the right thing.
The American patriots defeated the British, which were the superpower of the time.
Absolutely.
Because the farmers and the peasants harbored the Americans because the British were taking away from them and not giving to them. So we defeated them. So the Al-Qaeda type of people will defeat us with just big super-duper power if we don't change the attitude of the people who shelter them. The way to change the attitude of them is to give them a great deal. Spend a lot more money giving them stuff than we're going to spend giving George Bush's campaign contributors money.
Yeah.
Where we're giving the big money.
Do you see anything going that way? I don't see anything going that way.
No, but I'm saying right now,
if
you and me put this idea out, then some people will understand this idea.
Well, okay, I'm just looking for an historical example.
If you just say give everything, then you're just discrediting yourself because nobody will say. We have to allow for the rednecks, our American rednecks friends, to have their ninjas. And they should stop the ninjas of the other side, which the Al-Qaeda people are like ninjas. We should have our ninjas versus their ninjas. Champion versus champion. Go in that ring. Kickbox, whatever. Karate, like the two-finger punch, whatever it is. We really should honor that and have that. We should allow that. But we should not allow some massive boondoggling, high-tech weapons things that won't work. Or big tax cuts into those arms and munitions industry. We should put billions into rebuilding the really poor areas. Somalia. For example, the Palestinians. We should not be allowing Sharon to destroy everybody, every Palestinian, which is what he's to exterminate them, which is what he's trying to do.
Well, that's heading for that.
We should not allow them.
They react.
No, he's doing that because we're allowing him to do that. We should not be allowing him to do that. What we should be doing is we should be building, whether it's in Jordan or on the West Bank or wherever it is, or in Florida or wherever, we should build really beautiful places for all Palestinians that we can find.
Yeah.
Mansions with swimming pools.
We should do the right thing.
That's cheaper.
It'd be a lot cheaper. Yeah, you're right.
It will work. And then some mad suicide bombers will not be recruitable. Because they'll be swimming in their swimming pool.
Well, you're more or less saying, we should do the right thing by this planet.
Yeah, but
if we do the right thing by the planet,
but I'm not saying it in a naive way. I'm saying we should do the right thing, and we should also be wise and hard-nosed and have some ninjas. For example, in Afghanistan, if we had good intelligence, it is not missile defenses that would have protected us against these planes being crashed into our airplanes. It would be a really good intelligence network in the Middle East. We would have had good intelligence. We would not have let loose the people we trained to fight the Russians, let them just do whatever they feel like doing afterwards, and just leave.
Well, we've got a world, and we
don't have any Arabic-speaking, Afghani-speaking, Pashtun-speaking intelligence officers.
Yeah, I'm not worried. I'm not thinking about that side of things.
Yeah,
there's a lot of impetus toward that kind of a thing, and ninja and CIA and all kinds of things. Mr. Span, this kind of thing. They're going to have all kinds of.
No, there is not.
There is.
No, there isn't.
All right,
no, there's no impetus.
But there will be no problem in devoting.
Because
the kids are all flocking. They want to get into the CIA and fight the good fight. There'll be people who are willing to do that.
But I'm sorry.
But on the other side, where is
leadership wants to spend the money on high-tech surveillance, high-tech bombing, high-tech missile defense, high-tech satellite, war in space, because that goes into high value-added products that their cronies in the arms industry profit by.
Well, absolutely.
They don't want to spend money training human beings who will be ready to risk their lives to block human beings on the other side.
Yeah.
That's what the money
Well,
should be
I'm not
spent.
worried about the human beings blocking the ninjas. And so I'm working about the thing in the view of the fact, and they came in by taking a $2 trillion surplus and giving it to a bunch of wealthy people and so forth,
They
setting the
destroyed
tone
our
for the
economy
world.
again.
And now the stimulus is going to do it again, giving more to them and
They're
so forth.
trying to destroy
give them
our
to their
economy.
friends at Enron and so forth like that. They're going to do this. So there's that kind of a thing. But what I'm saying is, where is the source that makes you, I mean, I can see that developing very easily out of the bloodlust that's being manifest now. But where is it going to come to where they're going to have an enlightened policy toward making the world one from which people are not going to be so discontented as
you're overly the overly pacifist rhetoric
not
that
pacifist.
will get us nowhere.
I'm not pacifist. I'm not pacifist.
Well, but I'm saying you're acting like all, those in the Buddhist camp who say that all violence is bad, that there is no such thing as a surgical or preventive violence, those who say that, and who say, therefore, we don't want to hear about the CIA or the ninja, those people who say that. What they are doing is they are just giving an all-or-nothing thing. We all have to sit and just be nonviolent, although ultimately I agree with that. But when they say that in this context, what happens is that the warmonger types, they don't have decent human-to-human ability to defend against violence. They don't. They shout on television, we have the finest fighting forces, but then they can't take, they have the Powell Doctrine, we can't take a single casualty on the news, or we'll all crumble. That's why Al-Qaeda, because we pulled out of Somalia and ran for cover when we had a few people killed, who are supposed to be professional people risking their lives, then they realized they could get us in this man-to-man level.
Yeah, so
what I'm saying is this. So then they don't have any proper defense on that level. Then they let us get bashed. Then they're happy because then they can spend a lot of money on the big high-tech warfare level.
Maybe.
And they can do civilian bombing
They're
like
pretty
that.
clever. They're pretty clever.
And then they spend more money on the high-tech.
Yeah, right.
And they still don't spend money on the human being.
Yeah.
You follow me?
I do exactly, yeah. I think that's part of the pattern.
Look at that guy, John Walker.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because John
Lennon.
My roommate was a guy named Johnny Walker.
Yeah, John Lennon
who was a
Walker
cousin
Bush.
of George Bush, actually.
Yeah. What's going to happen to that young man?
But wait,
they set him on a self-educating...
Why was he fighting for the Qaeda?
Well, that's interesting.
Why wasn't he fighting on our ninja team?
Well...
He came from Mill Valley.
Well, he's fighting... Yeah,
we don't have a ninja team.
Yeah, we don't have a ninja team. No,
we don't have one.
What about if you're going on the Lemmings Leap and you've got a kind of thing where they're setting up these standards and so forth? The thing is, you're not going to feel as though that is a vision that you would want to fight, sign, and find out that kind of man to fight for. That is, it's not worthy of emulation. The leadership that's being presented by the political and business leadership that's running the world and going over a Lemmings Leap, there are people all over the world existentially will say, I don't want to sign on to that. I want something different. And what about the idea that we could find the vision to have the leadership be one that is going to present an appropriate pattern?
They still think they're highly admired. They're in denial about, in fact, the sort of self-defeating way that they are approaching things.
Well, I'll tell you, it's too bad
the point is that we won't help them come out of that denial merely by condemning them.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
We have to criticize what is criticizable, and we have to offer some sort of method and strategy that fits with what's plausible.
Yeah, right. Well,
that's why I'm saying that we have to do massive Marshall plans in all directions.
Okay. We got to say goodbye. Because we come to the end. That's the problem. All these things are done in time. It's a seamless web. Reality. But we got a problem. It's been your pleasure. Robert Thurman. Yeah, it's a pleasure talking to you. We want to wish you the best of holiday season and so forth. And there should be ecumenical kind of concern with spiritual traditions. And we should do all that we can to try and help all in this world in the best way to do the right thing by this planet. Because we're all in this mess together, and we're all committed, and we're all involved in that. So thanks a lot for coming in. We only just started.
My pleasure, Harold.
The surface of a huge subject. Interesting times we live in.
We do.
I still like Daedalus's line, history is a nightmare from which I'm attempting to awaken.
Right.
And do you think we are?